Okay. The planning commission meeting for March 11th will now come to order at 6 p.m. Everyone, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so we have a roll call here. We got Siri Harrison Brown.
Present.
We got Sarah Taylor.
Present.
Got Justin Rank. We've got Mala Mathu Badivu.
Present.
And then we got Larissa Brindell and now Cynthia McNabb and Maddie over there. So, okay, so we have, is there a motion approving tonight's planning commission agenda?
Yes, I move.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Great.
Any opposed? No. Okay, is there anything for the good of the order? Nothing. Okay, and then the minutes from, I believe it was January 28th. Have been drafted, are including in the planning commission's packet. Are there any corrections to the minutes? Do we have a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve the January 28th minutes as presented.
Okay. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the motion passes. Do we have any announcements this evening for the planning commission?
I do just have a couple. Just a quick reminder to take a look at the training materials that Troy had sent out a while back. I think it was in January. There are 2 trainings where we'd be looking for certificates from you. One is the short course on local planning, and the other one is the OPMA. If you're going to the training this weekend, the OPMA training will be covered there. So we can make sure that we have some documentation to add to the file. But the short course on local planning, definitely make sure to get that done. You should be able to take a look. I believe they have recordings online. You might have to sign up. I can take a look and confirm that, because Mala had that question. But make sure you go ahead and send me over the certificate for those. And if you're not able to attend the Saturday training, then you can do the OPMA training online and download a certificate there. And then I guess we can report that we have a new community development director, community and economic development director.
Yeah, I'm happy to report that we, at the council meeting last night, council approved the appointment of Avril Beatty. She will be the new community and economic development director. She begins March 30th. I'm very excited to have her. We have taken yet another employee from the city of Sammamish. So I think we'll now have 5 employees who started their career at Sammamish and are happy to come to Duvall to continue their career. She comes with glowing references, a lot of really good work in planning. So we're really excited to have her. We are through first round interviews for principal planner. We'll be doing second round interviews this week and into next week. And so we'll have a new Troy here soon, hopefully in April for the first April meeting. So lots of good stuff happening in the department. Our plans examiner, building inspector passed his certified building official test, which is about a 10-year career progression to become a certified building official. He passed this week, so we're really excited for the opportunities that he has in front of him to do building official work. And let's see what else. Part of your agenda today shows the docket that we have coming up, so we'll talk about that in the context of that agenda item. So I'll reserve more comments until we get to that agenda item.
Did I miss something with Troy? Is he?
Yes, Troy moved to Lake Stevens.
Oh, yes, yeah, I thought that he had sent out an email before he left, but maybe not. Yeah, so he's moved on.
He has the opportunity to work much, much closer to home. So lives in Arlington. This was a very long commute down to Duvall.
Yeah.
So. Good for him. Yeah, we're happy for him that his work-life balance will be immeasurably improved.
Yeah. Okay, the public is not here, so we don't have any comments from the public tonight. And I believe that kind of just puts us into the content of the evening.
All right, do we want to pass the floor to Abby?
I will pass the floor to Abby.
Thank you. Just give me a moment, please, to set up my various screens. Why does it not want to let me share the screen that I needed to? I'm sorry, we should have tested this out before.
That's all right. Let me know if I can do anything to help you out on our end. And I'm happy to share as well if needed.
All right, maybe Maddie, if you do that, that would be helpful. There's only 6 slides or so, so we should be able to navigate through them pretty easily. Sorry about that.
No worries. All right, that look good to you?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
And you
Okay.
can take it away.
So sorry, I have you guys on one screen and my notes on another screen. So I'm sorry if it does not look like I'm making eye contact with you all. So my name is Abby Weber. I'm with BHC Consultants. So BHC provides on-call planning services to the city of Duvall. So this has included working on the permit processing code updates, which is what we are here to talk about this evening. So Chapter 1408 is the permit processing chapter of the Duvall Municipal Code. So before we dive into that in greater detail, I just wanted to give you a little bit of background on land use permits. So when I'm talking about permit processing, I'm referring to land use permits, not building permits or construction permits or right-of-way permits. A land use permit is part of the land use entitlement process. It's how a developer is able to obtain approval for the right to use their land or change the use of their land. For instance, if a project could require a conditional use permit or a variance, they might want to change the zoning of their property or potentially subdivide it. Under land use permits, staff also review projects for compliance with the zoning code. They may conduct design review or environmental reviews. A land use permit might involve a public process like a public hearing or a public comment period. And then there's also a range of decision makers. So the planning director might make an administrative decision on certain types of projects, and those typically involve a little less discretion, or the city council might make a decision on a more complex project like a legislative action. Excuse me. So this process is highly regulated by state law and local regulations. And in the city of Duvall, those local regulations are Chapter 1408. So Maddie, I'm sorry, what slide are you on? We are.
I'm on slide 3.
Okay, perfect. This is where we are. Let's see. So state compliance. These updates to 1408 are entirely for state compliance. This all starts with the Growth Management Act. So the Growth Management Act was enacted in 1990. It established 13 goals that act as a basis for planning in Washington. One of those requires cities to process permit applications in a timely and fair manner to ensure predictability. But there was no framework for that yet created. So it wasn't until 5 years later when the state enacted RCW 3670B for local project review, when they established that framework for local land use permit review. So the framework includes rules for how to determine if your application is complete, a process for consolidating the review of multiple applications, a process for integrating environmental review, public notice and participation requirements, and also time periods for application review. So it wasn't until 2007 that the current version of Chapter 1408 was adopted to implement these requirements, and it has not been amended since then. So in 2023, the state passed Senate Bill 5290. So that amended 3670B, and we'll get into those changes on the next slide. So compliance with those changes was required by June of 2025. So that timeline coincided with the deadline for updating the comprehensive plan during the last periodic update cycle. So as you can see, it's now March of 2026. The city has missed that deadline, and the city is currently out of compliance with these requirements. So these amendments that we're going to talk about this evening are going to bring the city into compliance. Next slide, please, Maddie. So one of the key purposes of this Senate Bill 5290 is to increase the production of housing and reduce cost during permit review. So cities are required to set stricter review timelines and streamline the permit process. This includes allowing only one design review meeting and one open record public hearing. If jurisdictions do not meet these timelines, then a portion of permit fees have to be refunded unless certain steps are taken by the city. Next slide, please. So what does this mean for Duvall? So as I mentioned, so state compliance is required as soon as possible. Oh, sorry, back one slide, please, Maddie. Thanks. So state compliance is required as soon as possible. This is also an opportunity, though, to address other issues in the code. So we'll take a look at those inconsistencies, but also address some existing unclear language, resolve some issues regarding inefficient permit processing, and then also review the various types of permits to make sure that no permits are, that this chapter doesn't apply unnecessarily to any permits. And so essentially a major overhaul of this Chapter 1408 is long overdue. And so the city is approaching this as a complete repeal and replace of the existing chapter. Next slide, please. So how have we gone about updating Chapter 1408? This has been in the works for several years. City staff was involved in noting necessary updates long before BHC got involved. So staff has extensively reviewed the existing code. Staff had prepared multiple drafts and had conducted multiple rounds of internal discussion. BHC got involved in this work in early January. And so our role was to consolidate the staff work that had already occurred. We were triple checking for compliance with state law. We presented another draft for staff to review, in which they commented on, and we incorporated staff comments into the final draft that you see tonight. And again, there were multiple rounds of internal discussion. So that internal discussion was highly technical. It involved BHC staff, city administration, planning staff. We had the city engineer, the building official, public works director, and even the city clerk giving it a review for the public perspective. So there was also public involvement in this process. The city issued a SEPA determination of non-significance, which included a 2-week public comment period. No public comment was received. The draft amendments were posted on the city's website for public viewing. And then the draft amendments were also sent to the Department of Commerce for notice of the intent to adopt. So that's a step that's required by state law as well. So all of this, city work, BHC's efforts, and public involvement has gone into the development of the final draft, which of course then we continue to discuss internally. Next slide, please. Excuse me. So not only were we looking at the existing language in Chapter 1408 and the new state requirements, but we were also applying the state's guidance from the Department of Commerce on how to comply with 3670B. The Department of Commerce prepared a manual for directing cities on how best to do this and strengthen their code. So while we were at it, we also we organized the code, the sections within this Chapter 1408 chronologically in order to best align with how staff would process an application, and it also reflects the applicant experience when they're going through these steps. So we also sought to achieve greater clarity in language. So the chapter should be as clear as possible so that it can be applied consistently without the need for interpretation. We sought to simplify the code and process to reduce inefficiencies where possible. We sought to ensure that it's properly applied. So the chapter shouldn't be applied to permits unnecessarily. So for example, it doesn't need to apply to building permits. So we remove that from the applicability section. So you'll also see reduced director's discretion. So that allows for more consistent outcomes from applying the code. So these changes weren't limited to 1408. We also had to fix existing references throughout the rest of the code. So these touched on, you'll see changes to Title 2, Title 9, and Title 14. We also wanted to eliminate repetition and redundancy by essentially pulling anything related to permit processing that was in these other titles, pulling that into Chapter 1408 because it was previously scattered throughout. Next slide, please. So just a look at the timeline. So again, BHC was got involved with this work in early January 9th, that Commerce notice occurred. Mid-February was when the draft amendments were posted on the website and SEPA notice occurred with a public comment period. So we are here tonight for your first touch and first look at these amendments, March 11th. Next week, I'll be doing a similar presentation for City Council. And then in April and May, we anticipate having a public hearing with both the Planning Commission and then City Council, followed by adoption. Next slide, please. So that wraps up my presentation, and we'd like to open up to your questions or discussion.
There's a lot of material.
Yeah, I didn't have any. I think it's a great thing, but
Yeah. We've really tried to streamline, and we did something a little different this time. We involved the clerk which we normally don't do in planning and building. So because this set of code is so applicant oriented, so we asked the clerk to read it. Could someone off the street read this and understand how to do it? Because staff are really mired in the backside of it, the technical pieces of how to process an application and are we meeting deadlines and kind of the technical components of it, but we had not, as part of our code revision process, asked a different department that does it, that is not an expert in this work, to read and say, can anybody understand it? So we really tried to be thoughtful this time around because so many other users of it exist other than just city staff.
I do have one question. I did notice that the timeline changed, like, you guys have strict timelines. How are you going to keep up with that?
Well, I can turn to Abby and Maddie, but I'll give you the cute answer, which is we don't have a choice.
I know that's true.
So
That's
we
true.
must make it work, state law. If we
Yeah.
don't make those timelines work, then, there are consequences to the city for not making it work. And what that was, we have had to be in compliance even though our code wasn't written since June of 2025. So one of the issues that presented itself, for instance, during the mosque hearing, was that we were exceeding the deadlines that we were required to comply with in that process because the rules were already in effect. And so it's not just getting the permit through the land use process, it's having a hearing and having the hearing examiner's decision and the appeal period all factor into that is 170 days. And so it was really important that we continue the process because we were already exceeding the deadlines. And so we got a waiver of that timeline, but any new thing, we have to be mindful. It's not just the internal work, it is the whole gamut of land use approval process that fits with that timeline. But Maddie, if you want to talk more practically about how we're going to make it work.
Yeah, I think something that we've learned over time is just working backwards from the hearing date is helpful because I don't know if we were doing that as much over the last couple of years. We were just in some ways we were kind of working more closely with the applicant to make sure that they were comfortable with the staff report that we were providing to the hearing examiner and that they felt comfortable with the date and the time, and all of that stuff is necessary. But I think just in the future, realizing that while we need to do that and make sure that the applicant is kind of following along in the process, we also need to be clear with ourselves and with them that we need to be kind of working backwards. And even from the very beginning, from when we first intake the application and deem it complete, we have to realize that kind of even starting from that very beginning point, all of that is going to factor into the end timeline results.
Yeah. One of the recommendation I have is give them the timeline. Hey, this is how we work. That's gonna help them also because I know planning is not an easy thing. So yeah, totally understand. I think giving them the deadlines. Hey, this is how the process works, and if you don't hear, then you tell the consequence as well.
Yeah, and I think it can be confusing sometimes for applicants because we would tell them the timeline that we need to adhere to, which is, for example, 170 days. But it can be confusing because that doesn't mean that from the time that you apply to the time that you get your decision is going to be 170 calendar days, because once we return comments back to the applicant, that clock stops until they resubmit. And so I think sometimes newer or newer applicants or smaller developers get confused by that. So yeah, I think your point is a good one, just making sure that we're clear on how we calculate those timelines and what that looks like.
That's right.
I just wanted to add on the subject of timelines. The existing timeline in the code is 120 days. So in some cases, the timeline is getting much shorter and dropping down to 65 days. And in some cases, it's actually getting longer. So the city permits were already across the board subject to a 120-day timeline. So those, I don't want to call them easier, but those more black and white type 1 administrative decisions are actually going to be subject to a much shorter timeline, where the type 3 and type 4 more complicated decisions with a little more discretion by the decision maker, or quite a bit more discretion, have a longer review time period. And we've outlined these review time periods are subject to very strict rules. And so the rules that are, as they're written out in the code, like what do you consider a day, what days are counted towards the review clock? For instance, the clock isn't ticking when it's in the applicant court. It's written out pretty clearly.
Yeah, the clock is ticking when it's in the city's court to kind of force the city to process promptly.
Or the changes that BHC is helping with, was there systems and operations and workflows and integration with software changes? Was that all part of BHC scope, or is that more internal with the city, like adapting to what's being handed down and kind of rewriting a workflow?
So that's on the city's end. So we have a software system that goes that we use for processing permits. And so all of that had to be adapted internally to the new deadlines.
Yeah, and unfortunately, our permit software does not right now give us an easy way to track those timelines. I think some other softwares do. But so our tracking of the timelines is separate from, it's separate from the OpenGov portal. But I mean, I think we have a pretty solid tracking procedure in place to make sure we're on top of those. Yeah, and we can assign deadlines for kind of individual steps in our OpenGov system. So say I'm assigned to a planning review step, we can say, we think the first review should take maximum 4 weeks, so that we can kind of assign a deadline for that specific step.
And this isn't a new process, it's more like a refined process. So the city already does have, a permit system in place based on the existing 1408. So again, this framework was first adopted by the state in, like almost 30 years ago. And so these are just recent changes to that existing framework. So we're really just refining the city's existing process for how to review land use permits.
And in this case, I think simplifying too, taking things out that didn't need to be part of, part of this state law package was not intended to capture, public works right of ways and what other public works things were in there.
Utility permit, like utility service, stuff like that. So there's others more minor permits that aren't necessarily attached to a hearing examiner decision or a land use entitlement that were kind of stripped out of this, just because this is really about processing land use entitlements. So that's one way that I was looking at it, was because we city projects, by our code now, we have to follow permit process. But we also have to follow a public process because we have to follow rules to expend public funds, get council approval over certain thresholds and all those things. So it's kind of like, in some cases, we were double doing, some work where the intention is not to skirt following the rules, following our code and all that kind of stuff. It's just to simplify not only applicants that come into the city, but also city process too. Because we want to be more efficient with staff time and stuff like that. So it was kind of twofold, and it was really nice working with BHC and it was a long process to get to the place.
So you're waiting on PSE permits, is the clock stop again?
Well, so PSC usually, they fall under right-of-way permits. So that wouldn't even be, part of this permit processing
But they can
code.
run in conjunction with each other, like as you're going through the planning process, could you also be working on the?
Still, yes, absolutely, yes, because they wouldn't fall into the consolidation rules. Because there are consolidation guidelines that are captured in 1408 for certain permit types, and land use entitlements. And again, right-of-way permits and things of that nature don't fall within those permit types anymore. So we don't even have to talk about concurrently running things or anything like that. We can just make sure that we manage things internally between departments to make sure that an applicant isn't submitting permits ahead of getting their land entitlement and stuff like that. So that's already coordination that we had to do anyway. This is just kind of making sure that the rules and the way that we were following the code, it matches. So yeah, long answer to your question, I think.
Makes sense, yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions for Abby or for staff on this? So in terms of next steps, we'll come back to planning commission to see after you've had time, if you have any other questions, suggestions, edits. So you'll see this again before we go through the public hearing process.
Okay. So does planning commissioners have any other questions or statements that they'd like to provide staff? No?
No.
Okay. Move on to new business.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
Okay.
Have a good night.
Good night. All right, and we do have, let's see, we have one more thing under. We can just pull up the agenda here. We do have one other item under presentation.
Okay. Let's do another presentation.
All right, we're gonna talk about the 2024 Comprehensive Plan Periodic Update Work Program. I can share the work plan or?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, let me just pull that up here. And yeah, you should have received the work program as well as an additional memo from Burke at the very end of your packet about this item. Is that legible?
A little bit here, yeah.
Well, I don't have my glasses on. That's perfect. Thank you.
So good evening, Larissa Grandel, Public Works. I've partnered with Cynthia on this as well as we utilized Burke to help us with some land capacity work. The background for this is we adopted our comp plan last July, and the Department of Commerce, the state, appealed our adoption of our comp plan, saying that we didn't quite go far enough in identifying housing units, especially affordable housing units, and meeting those targets that were given to us by King County. So we just didn't do some of the work to show that we do have that capacity. So we developed this work program. Cynthia and I did again with input from Burke. It's 3 phases. So the first phase was to finalize and update our land capacity analysis that we did as a part of the periodic update. And basically it was the next step in the process. Commerce gives you guidance for almost everything that we have to do in planning and in long range planning. And the steps that were identified in land capacity analysis were show us what your capacity is. And then if you get to the to the end of it and you show a deficit, you need to start at the top and you need to figure out how to fix that deficit. And the tools that they give you are upzoning is one of the bigger ones, because the denser developments can typically lend to affordable housing units, which is where everybody's kind of in this, all the jurisdictions are kind of in this needing to identify those units in their targets. So we did that work. We've proposed some updates to our zoning code. Those will be coming. And then we also had to look at identifying emergency housing and emergency shelters and show that we have capacity within the city to support those uses. And the kind of quick and dirty guidance that Commerce gives is, if you don't want to do a quantitative analysis, meaning go by parcel in your zones to show that you have that capacity, you can outright allow those uses in the zones designated for residential and hotels. So that was the approach that we took for that. There will be code coming in the future for that. And then right now we're in phase 2 with our zoning code update. Staff internally did a draft of some of those amendments. We then sent them to BHC so that they can do similarly to what they did with 1408. They can kind of, take a step back, not have, such personal investment maybe in the code, and just apply, make sure that we're following the Commerce guidance and all of the legislation that came out. So they're doing that right now, and I think they plan on.
Yeah. So one thing I would add to the Commerce appeal, so we were appealed on 2 things. One is that we didn't show our work in housing capacity for affordable housing and middle housing targets. And 2, we didn't show that we had room for the King County jobs growth. So we also had an employment number that was given to us where we had to show capacity for an increase in jobs. And so the Burke analysis that you had in your folder got us to both of those numbers within the city by redefining how we zone land in Duvall. But the other thing that Commerce said, and this was kind of new, so over this summer, if you follow housing news, several cities had their comprehensive plans appealed, not just because they didn't show capacity within their city. So Mercer Island, Clyde Hill, Yarrow Point, Bainbridge Island is kind of going through it now. But also that they didn't take efforts to remove barriers to affordable housing. So it wasn't just that you had to show capacity, you had to show that you were doing work within your code to remove barriers that exist in your current code that would prohibit the building of affordable housing. So it ended up being a much bigger project than, hey, go show capacity. It was also, you have to do all this other work as well. So that's where we are. So we put together a fairly exhaustive list of all the places in our code where we had barriers to affordable housing, or where the state had already or had legislated in 2023 and 2024 on measures to promote affordable housing. And so Commerce is telling us that we also must do that work in addition to showing capacity. So this comprises the list of things that have to be done. We're kind of tracking and reporting back to council. If you go up a little bit, the first part on the zoning changes. So Larissa put together kind of a draft of all of the policy work and code changes that would support affordable housing incentive programs. What is called STEP. What does that stand for?
STEP is going to be a new code section, and that's for the
acronym for.
I can't remember what the acronym is, but it's transitional. I can't remember what the S is for, but it's the transitional emergency.
Maybe transitional emergency housing.
Yeah.
So shelters, emergency
Shelter, that's
housing.
what it is.
As well as code to rezone And those rezoned code changes are reflective of the numbers that were put together. So their effort to show capacity. So BHC is doing a peer review of that work. We will have all of that zoning work done by the end of the month. It'll go to staff review in April, and Planning Commission will see those changes at the May 13th Planning Commission meeting. When you see the map, it rezones 60% of the city.
I mean, probably half. The zone that's not gonna change is R4. For all intents and purposes, we have a R4.5. That's gonna change to R6. R6 will be R8. R8 will be R12. R12 will be R20. Then mixed use 12 will be R30. Our mixed use institutional will be mixed use 20. And then another one of the zoning
Preserving the
designations.
mobile home parks.
There'll also be, we'll be doing the mobile home park code, which is gonna be similar to what we have right now. It's called RIV. It's the Riverview designation that's kind of been in code for a while but hasn't been used. So it's to protect what are affordable, existing affordable housing within the city. So things like the mobile home park and the co-op that's down here. There may be opportunity for others, but I think we got pushback from one of the property owners that they're like, no, we don't want that. So there's conversation to be had, but the intent is to protect what is already affordable housing. And then
Height changes, is there any height changes?
so yes, and there will have to be height changes with the upzone, right? Or else it just doesn't math. There's Florida area ratios and things like that. One of the things that's also coming with this is going to be an affordable housing code section, a chapter for affordable housing requirements. Everything that subdivides over 10, or it's either 10 or 8. It's in the legislation. Anything that subdivides over either 8 or 10 units per acre will have a affordable housing unit requirement. And I think right now we're proposing somewhere between 10 and 15%, which is 1 for some and more for others. And then there will be incentives for offering more than what is required. And that could get you additional market rate units. It could get you additional floor height. It could get you another floor if you're capped at if for mixed use, if you're capped at 4 over commercial. If you provide additional affordable over what is required, you could get a height up to X feet or whatever it is. And so you'll see tables that will come in the new zone. Then the proposed zone changes, and then you'll also see those incentives in the affordable housing code. There's also a multi-family tax, exempt tax program that we will have to create. That's another incentive to allow for affordable housing. So it's just all of these tools that are out there that have been given by Commerce and King County and all these things. Instead of us just saying, okay, yes, we will do that, we actually have to do it as part of this appeal. We actually have to write the code. We have to adopt the code. We can't just say, oh, that's in our long range plan. We'll get it done in the next 5 years.
Yeah, because these policies were in the housing action plan as kind of policy statements like Duvall will and supports X. What Commerce has told us is, great, you will implement this code. The impact of the zoning changes. So once it gets through planning commission, goes to city council, we have kind of a rough feeling that everybody understands, has had the legislative process where you can ask questions, make changes. We then have to go through a very large scale public process of notifying everybody who's going to be rezoned that they are going to be rezoned, and it's 50% of the city, at least.
Mm-hmm.
So open houses, workshops, being in neighborhoods with a pop-up tent saying, we're here to answer questions. It is probably one of the largest public process things that we will do and, you know, in planning.
Yes.
Ever.
Well, we
Yeah.
shouldn't, I mean, if everything goes as intended by our long range planning goals, which is looking to the horizon year of 2044, we should not need to do work similar to this
Again, for until, yeah.
for at least another 10 to 15 years. So it is significant. It is like Cynthia has mentioned, just work that we just did not complete as a part of the periodic process. I think it was well intentioned for us to complete this work because we all knew we had to, but not seeing Commerce appeal the comp plan was it was kind of a little bit out of left field for us. So
Well, and to be fair to Commerce, you know, there were certainly, I think, voices and correspondence that said, we don't know how Duvall is going to do this, so we're not really going to work hard to do it. And so there was a little bit of, oh, well, we'll annex and then we'll get our numbers in annexed areas. Well, the land use folks and the folks that don't want expansive growth in the unincorporated areas was like, whoa, wait, that's not how this is supposed to go. So I think it's a very important exercise that we're involved in now to, you know, show our work but it's going to be a lot coming at you really fast, which is why we wanted to show you this. So the good news is some of the other things that were identified are complete. So there were changes to parking that Maddie worked on. So Maddie, I don't know if you want to share those. And I think you all saw those.
Yeah.
So that part's done. Permit processing is also one of the identified barriers to affordable housing. That if you have these cumbersome processing procedures, that's why the state adopted them to say cities can't hold up developers to affordable housing. So that's on the list. That's work we're doing now. Design standards are also if you have design guidelines or regulations that make it really difficult to build affordable housing or multifamily housing, those now are largely prohibited. So that work is moving forward. We have that working right now with Burke is helping us with that work. All this, by the way, has to be done by December 31st.
yes, then dear.
Can you say a little more about the zoning changes for employment development part?
Dorothy, you might understand, so we had to change.
Yes, so it goes along with some of the changes that we did for commercial, and then we added some mixed use where there wasn't mixed use previously, and so that allowed for oh goodness, something else that we did was it was a math exercise, and it's in the Burke memo that's in your packet. We also had to go back to King County for
That's right.
for the job stuff because there was a methodology that we did in 2021. We started the land capacity analysis with King County because they're the ones that issue our targets. And so all the jurisdictions in King County will have our meetings and we do this. There's like 4 phases. And one of the things that we did was based on zoning, based on like Florida area ratio and things like that. That's how you calculate how many jobs that you would have. Well, the way that we did it with King County looked like we were not accurately capturing the jobs numbers with the capacity with the land that we had in the capacity. So Burke did a good job of, I can't remember what
We ended up with a slight excess based on new capacity.
Yeah,
With the rezoning.
and it was because they looked at when we have mixed use zoning, we applied methodology instead of counting housing units and jobs at X. We split that if it's 1 acre. 30% of it say we used for residential and housing, and then the remainder 70 we used towards housing. So we just got a level, like 1 layer more detail in order to show that we do actually have the capacity to support our jobs number. It's just that we had to get to it just a little bit different way than that King County did the methodology for everyone. So we did talk to King County.
We had to get King County to approve our new methodology.
Yes, until Commerce would say, okay. So we talked with King County at the end of last year with the planner who I did the land capacity analysis with in 2021. Rebecca, she was great. Burke was also the consultant that helped King County develop the methodology for the land capacity analysis. So it was kind of the perfect storm that we got to work with just the right people and get some of this work done in a short amount of time to satisfy Commerce, at least to get the work plan started after the appeal was announced. So it does show the residential and employment capacity by zone. And then, yes, thank you. Shows the affordability level. That was one of the things that we were missing. Can you scroll down? And keep going. This talks about the breakout of how we meet the different levels of affordable housing. That was one thing that we needed to give more detail in. All jurisdictions, I think you needed to, but it's just part of this this new requirement coming out of this periodic planning time. Next, can you go scroll down again?
The last page.
Oh, it
Let
is?
me go back.
There is a.
Are you looking?
Did it seem out of whack that Duvall wasn't meeting the jobs requirement when, like, let's just say like Carnation did,
Well,
North Bend did?
the one thing.
Not totally.
North Bend or Snoqualmie and Carnation were different.
Yeah.
Because they had like math errors. We were a little bit different in the fact that we calculated capacities with King County. Like the capacity that we calculated for jobs was 680 jobs, but they gave us 990. So they already gave us something that said you need to fill the gap with what your existing zoning is. You now need to go back and I mean, basically the writing was on the wall, because one of the questions I asked our consultant during the periodic review is I was like, well, what do you do when you calculate a capacity and then they give you a target that's so much higher? And the answer is, rezone, upzone, allow for more of the uses that you need. So there's a starting. I can work on it.
But and Snoqualmie and Carnation, so follow this work.
Or not.
Snoqualmie and Carnation got their King County numbers. That's called a reconciliation process. So when everybody got their numbers and the cities had to start going through their comprehensive plan updates, Snoqualmie and Carnation went to King County and said, we want these reconciled for Snoqualmie. They had a math error. They were calculating capacity with some work that was held by the Snoqualmie tribe. They should never have been calculated in their capacity analysis. That an issue with their water table too. So they got their numbers lowered through a reconciliation process. Carnation went to King County and said, hey, we can't meet our targets. We want to be reconciled too. We have the Toll Dam, we're in a flood zone. They had a mathematical error too, and so they got reconciled. So that kind of left North Bend and Duvall. North Bend was fine. They already had pipeline projects that were on the books for affordable housing. They had land designated for it, and they're building more commercial out there that they're trying to find tenants for now. So North Bend didn't really have a problem with their targets, which kind of left us not necessarily alone, but in the Snoqualmie Valley, they slightly uniquely situated well, we don't have transit. We become an island. Most of our land's encroached with wetlands. We don't have the kind of commercial base that North Bend does to draw those job numbers. So how are we going to do it? And ultimately, what the regulatory agencies are telling us is you get to upzone. Yeah. We're not going to have more transit though, and we're not going to have a hospital. But
The important flip side to this which sometimes leaves me with my own personal heartburn, is just because we create the code to allow it, doesn't mean it will ever happen.
Yeah.
And that's part of the GMA requirement, is that you just have to show that you can support it, you have capacity for it, and it's there.
And they removed all the barriers in
Yes.
code to, you know, you can't make it more expensive, you can't make it harder to do. Yeah. Meanwhile, so all the cities went through this process, and last month, so cities had a hard time. So Mercer Island got appealed, Clyde Hill is in litigation, Yarrow Point. So some of them that you kind of expected to not really want to do affordable housing. So some cities, Beaux Arts and Bellevue said, yeah, we're just not going to do this. Like, because the penalty wasn't really, you couldn't really attach a really strong penalty to it. So what Commerce did after that, and January 1 was the effective date of this new program. Every year, the Department of Commerce gets to choose 20 cities to target for enforcement. So ours is appealed, and we're working very nicely with Commerce. We're going to get through it. It's going to be a lot of work.
We're their guinea pig, I feel like.
We were their guinea pig of like, how can you get into settlement agreements with a city who is amenable to doing all of this extra work? We're playing nice. For the cities that decided not to play nice with Commerce effective January 1, they said, oh, well, now we do targeted enforcement. And so all the work that Carnation did to get their numbers reconciled, they're now in targeted enforcement from the Department of Commerce. So the Department of Commerce just last month announced their 20 cities who are now being targeted for specific enforcement for not meeting these numbers in Carnation. So you can think you got through one process, but they'll find you. So if we go back to the work plan, so the next big set of things you'll see, we'll get through. Your next big work is permit processing. Then we'll do zoning. Design standards will be likely in front of Planning Commission late summer. Legal lots will probably come soon, I think.
Yeah, that's it. That's another just little part of code that was a barrier, and a barrier specifically to what is considered like the original plats of Duvall. So Old Town and everything west of 3rd Avenue, basically, and held by Poe Clemens, and then Cherry Valley Road. So that kind of area, well, not even that far, but anyway, it's the old plats of Duvall that have the really narrow lots, and there's very specific language about things that you couldn't do. For some of that, we ran into situations where we're like, oh, it would be really nice if we had some flexibility to get this alternative housing type. So that was the intent about looking at the pre-existing legal lot code and infill. That really, it only applies to just right up here on the hill, the original plats.
But right now you can't do much with them.
With a single.
With it, yes, because there are some vacant single ones, but it would be cool. You could do stuff with it. It's our code currently doesn't support it, and so that typically is seen as a barrier to alternative housing types, which fit the niche for middle housing and affordable housing. So,
and then unit lot subdivision, Maddie's working on. That went for peer review today.
Yeah, so BHG is going to take a look at that as well, give us any feedback that they have, and then we'll route it for department review.
And then Maddie, do you want to give a preview of what that is generally? It's another state law change.
Yeah, and this one's interesting because previously they've given us a shorter deadline for it, and so I want to say we were going to have it done by maybe December of last year, I would say, but then they extended the deadline, so now we have another 2 years to get that done, but we're just getting it done as a part of this process as well. It's basically another form of ownership, and it looks a lot like this typical subdivision process. But it basically means that you're looking at what's called a parent lot, which is the typical, the lot lines you see on King County maps. But then you can split it out into what's called unit lot. And those don't have to conform to the typical setbacks or dimensional standards that the parent lot would have to typically conform to. So it gives you a little bit more flexibility as far as placement of units within the parent lot. And it's similar to condo agreements, but it's different in that you're actually drawing the lines as you would in a typical subdivision where you're dividing up land.
Can be sold individually.
Yeah, yeah. So it adds more flexibility for kind of method of ownership of land. Yeah, just provides more flexibility. So that'll be interesting to see once we've implemented that, to see what interest there is in pursuing that kind of subdivision type. But yeah, we'll definitely have a lot more information about that in the coming months. Yeah, maybe I'll try and think up kind of an exercise where you can kind of diagram out.
I'm looking at two of them today, so it's like, like all this stuff is like, it's just so relevant to the last 8 hours of my life.
Yeah.
So I think that's most, is there another page? Okay, so that's kind of the large scale code work. Then we have to rezone. Then we have to go back into the comprehensive plan and put new language in to the land use element.
I think it's 5 of the 8 elements.
Yeah, so all the work we did with the comp plan, it's not redoing all of it, thank goodness.
Just updating the language and change the some of the tables that showed the housing targets. It's going to change those to show what we did with the updated like capacity analysis with Burke. So
yeah. The King County Affordable Housing Group, Larissa and I met with them. They want to see some language changes in the land use element
in housing.
and housing. So once we get through all the code changes, the zoning, the very last part of this is to go back into the comp plan, change the language, bring it back to planning commission, back to council to re-adopt
The comp plan,
the comp plan.
the whole thing. It's basically like repealing the adoption from last year and re-adopting the comp plan this year. So
Hearings. Yeah. So what a fun time to be on planning. And then I think we do have to go back and redo because our transportation analysis, I think that's on the next page. We noted that our transportation analysis and the transportation element was predicated on the old, I reference it when I refer to PSRC.
Oh, here we go. Let's see.
Yeah. So we have to have our transportation folks run the model again to make sure that the transportation element and the data in that is still supportable with the new capacity. And then I know the agenda item is docket. Is a critical areas ordinance also part of the docket, or is it just a comp plan? It's just
So, and actually, we don't need to include this as part of the
okay.
docket, so there's not anything on.
Okay. I think that's just the work of the comp plan and doesn't include the critical areas ordinance. It's going to come back to you. Sign code is going to come back soon.
yeah, nothing from, yeah. We're doing a town line update with that. Well, you guys won't see.
Questions on all of this?
Okay, now we may move on to new business. And if you'd like to take a break for 5 minutes.
We don't have anything on the agenda for new business, or unfinished business.
Okay.
So that's all.
There being no further testimony, I will close the public hearing on this matter at
This
So-
wasn't a public hearing, so you can just close.
at
the-
this hearing at 7:05.
Okay.
Did you